Time. So my name is David Sass. I am the business leader for South Dakota. Just a little over 10 years in agronomy. I had the opportunity, I've worked in Washington, Washington State, I guess I should say it that way. In the Palouse, I've worked for other biological companies in the past. So that'll kind of be my milieu. When we have questions on biology, I'll talk about that with the first couple of products. From there, Lewis, if you'd like to.
My name is Lewis Stearns from Ohio. I run a crop consulting firm that covers Eastern Midwest and a couple states in the Pacific Northwest.
I'm John Torrance. I'm a ninth generation farmer in West Central Illinois, and last year I won a yield contest with 113.8 bushel beans.
Did you hear that back there in the corner, Jediah? Yeah, 113.8. So I gave him a little bit of crap last time.
I like to round up to 114, and he shut me down earlier.
Yeah,
so.
I was like, so it's 114, and he's like, wow, it's close enough, which is exactly why I'm 6 feet tall. So we're gonna have some conversations today on stress mitigation. We had a really neat opportunity here in Wisconsin, which normally doesn't happen in Garden State, right? Early drought stress, heat. So we're going to talk about stress mitigation, how our products impact stress, and how, as producers. So again, I'm from South Dakota. We're well aware of heat stress, and so the reason I came onto this company was I was actually a private retailer and sold my company to come here and be a member of the team. Before we delve too deep into products, we are going to talk a little bit about why stress mitigation is important, and it turns out, as we've talked today, Lewis, a lot of folks are tepid on knowing some of the questions you have. So,
yep. So when we're going to raise a 114 bushel soybean crop, we need a lot of seeds, right? We need heavy seeds, so we need a lot of pods. What's that?
The other way. We need big seeds.
Yep, big seeds. Well, we get paid on weight, right?
Big seeds.
Yep. So we need that, and that all comes back to we need flowers, right? Because those seeds and those pods start as flowers. Does anybody know how many what percentage of the flowers actually turn into pods on the soybean plant?
I did once upon a time.
So it's a range, 50 to 75% of the pods or the flowers will be aborted and not make it. So if you think about how many are on here, and if we can just keep that another 10%, what that can amount to in bushels, that could be huge. That could be 5, 6, 7, 8 bushels right there. So some of the products and some of the timings we're going to talk about today are based on that. It's just mitigating stress and providing nutrients at the right time to be able to keep those flowers on the plant and turn those flowers into full-size ponds.
So I think you guys have already got to see Ed Corrigan, which means mine isn't going to sound as good as his. But so what we were talking about earlier was, during stress situations, why do we get, elongated stems? Why we don't have, beans lower to the ground, and it's stress, right? So we've already lost, a couple inches of plant on the bottom, and how are we going to impact mitigating stress early? Because that's hard, right? We don't get to decide the weather, and by when we planned it, we've already done a lot of the work. So what we're gonna talk a lot about, and what we really want to hammer on is foundational treatments. I guess we didn't ask this time. What group are we in here? Where are you folks from?
Indiana. Central Indiana.
Central Indiana. Okay.
Ohio.
Oh, okay. Perfect. Okay. So, have we used the Excavator product? Okay. Fantastic. Fall applied, spring applied. Both. What did you like more? This is a good question.
On corn stalks, I like it because I do all the bean planting.
Yep.
I like the corn stalks to already be planted when I hit it with the planter. So
Absolutely.
Because we're no-till, so.
Oh, fantastic. Good. Fall. Yeah.
On the corn stalks for us,
Yep.
it's fall. And now we found the beans in the spring works better on the
Yep.
bean stubble.
Absolutely. So that's what we've all seen. Some of us who are a little bit farther north, we have to worry about temperatures and moisture. John actually has the best explanation, I think, about how to handle you know, because I'm just going to speak to South Dakota. Sometimes we're harvesting corn right up until freeze, right? So sometimes we lose late season opportunities for Excavator. As I've been a salesman since I was a teenager, so my brain works as a salesperson. John is a farmer, and he thinks a little bit smarter in the engineering side. So can you just tell us how you set up to get your product out in a timely manner?
Absolutely. So if you're going to spray Excavator, you're going to take a $600,000 sprayer out there if you got something new. Don't do that. Put a system on your corn head. Put a little tank on there. And the jug says 10-gallon acre coverage, and I'm not going to say you should do anything less than that. But what I do is 2-gallon, run some really small nozzles, put a small boom section right on the back of your corn head, and get it done the day you combine. You can't do it any better.
We had
Oh, I can't wait to hear the conversation my brother on that.
It's really simple. We run a 12-row, but got a 200-gallon tank on there. What's up?
You got it set on your feeder house?
Yeah, it's right on the backbone of the corn head. 200-gallon tank, run 2-gallon acres, super small nozzles. We've got a chopping corn head. There's a nice vortex coming right off the back of that corn head, and we're using some really small nozzles. And you can see it mist, and you can see it hang, and it settles in that cornfield. And I don't know that you can do a better job. And
So
the timing's great.
we had a really great conversation about Excavator in the last group, and it brought out a lot of really great points. And one of them, you have a chopping head.
Yep.
So you have a lot of small pieces. So we have wet corn, and we have it pretty well chunked up. So that means, right, we're increasing the surface area. So that 2 gallons, which your representative will not suggest you operate at from Meristem. So I allow him to say that. We like 10 gallons at least. But we're getting more coverage. And not only that, so for those of us who have used Excavator, one of the things is if you do a 60-mile-an-hour flyby, you can't always tell if it's out there working because it is not going to eat the outside rind of that plant. It's going to eat the inside. So if we're able to chunk it up a little bit, get it on there wet, if it has food, sugars from the plant, you increase your efficacy greatly, which allows for fall applications, harvest applications. And if you don't want to follow, if you don't want to follow the combine with a sprayer, there are other options. As at-home engineers, you guys can do.
I will add, like I did last time, everybody likes to talk about spraying it on your corn stalks, your corn fodder. That's great, but you got to get it on your bean stubble also and get that broke down. You get cold weather, you'll see your light green, dark green strips, and it pays. You put it on every acre and you do it twice. Don't really do it twice, but it works that good.
Yeah, we've heard that. We've heard the pushback from guys like, well, there's barely anything out there on beans. There's enough.
Yeah.
There's enough for it. There's food for it. And all it does, right, it's eating that stubble, and obviously it's great, it helps planting in the spring, but what it also helps us is utilization of phosphate. You guys, I've said this to farmers in South Dakota, and sometimes they miss it a little bit, but those plants are also money. They're money that you spent in fertilizer. So if you're able to go out there and get some of that phosphate back right away for your next crop, you're reinvesting in yourself immediately instead of waiting for long-term breakdown of residue.
Absolutely.
Do we have any questions on Excavator? We spent quite a while on Excavator the last couple of times. So,
real quick, the timing of tillage after Excavator.
Fantastic.
I like to wait a week. I've been told you can go within about 48 hours behind it. I choose not to. So my preference is a week. You can push it to 5 days, probably still have really good results. You'll have good results either way, but it's just nice to give it time if you can.
What type of tillage are you talking about?
Anything. Anything. It doesn't matter what you're doing. Because when you get it on there, you got to get it started in that plant. And if you spray it today and do tillage this afternoon, you're going to rub some off into the dirt and you want it started and growing.
Does it still help to break it down if you do tillage and you bury the residue?
Absolutely.
So that's actually what we were talking about is these are, it doesn't matter. So we're going to talk about Revline, hopper throttle soybean after this. So we talk about CFUs, colony forming units. The concern is, and that's why we talked about a week, is that we want those microbial little buggers to be able to get in there and start eating and get colonized first, because obviously that's a violent thing, ripping up that soil, and it just allows us the greatest opportunity to have good coverage on the residue. So that's, I say 5 days, some folks say like 2 days, a week's the safest, but yeah, so that'd be why. And we've seen on no-till corn, and I haven't said this yet, which kind of makes me, so when you spray it on no-till corn, it'll actually go down into that root ball. It will hollow out root balls, which is great. It's proof of concept, obviously, but.
That's a lot of our ground we can't do tillage on,
Yep.
It's highly erodible.
Oh, yeah.
We're no-till and cover crops,
Yep.
and so would this fit in a situation where you would spray it on the corn fodder after harvest and then no-till your cover crop into it?
Yeah, I don't have a lot of highly erodible soils as per the NRCS.
You're putting a cover crop in the fall.
Yeah, that's what, if we lose
Oh,
all of
yeah.
our fodder and all of our cover,
Yep.
It
we're
won't.
definitely gonna have to have a cover
It
crop.
won't necessarily take the
Yeah.
fodder away. I mean, it does to a point, but I haven't seen a situation where it's actually visually reduced the residue to where
Yeah.
that would be a problem. Now, there was some discussion in the last group about when you put it on wet, how much quicker it works.
Yep.
And that piece, but I would say you're okay if you're going to spray afterwards.
It's an amazing product, but it is not a magic eraser. It doesn't just throw those plants out of your field. You'll still have the outside of the plant, the rind, but what's that?
It's a different type of fodder.
Yeah, it very much so.
I mean,
Yeah,
as far as
and
handling it.
it breaks much easier. That's
Correct.
the planting ease. You still have that out there, but it just breaks like clay. Yeah.
So if he's putting cover crops on chasing the combine and the excavator chasing the combine, is it better off for him to wait and put the excavator on the spring and break down the cover crop too?
Okay, so that is a great question. So we'll lose some early season phosphate availability because we didn't break down that residue, but we have alleviated some monetary expenditure. If we want to talk about planting ease, the value of wheels on planters, things of that nature, if we assign a value to those, I think it's still valuable. You know what, John? You're a farmer. I want to hear what you think.
Well, all right. So my first thought was put a boom on your planter. I mean, literally, you just put a 1-inch pipe out there, couple $1,000, you can have a system done that's simple and easy. But fall applied, it all depends on your situation and what your yield was like. If you've got great big tall beautiful plants, you're going to want to put it on the fall because you got a lot of residue. If you're talking 150 bushel yield potential, you're probably safe to wait till the spring.
It's definitely a field by field.
We have some trials with it on cereal rye that we
Oh,
used
good.
on this spring and burned down.
Yep.
But then we also have some river bottom ground that if you don't do tillage, the river comes up, floats it all off. So you have to do the tillage to bury it.
Yeah. So so working out in western South Dakota and having a lot of wheat producers in my area, that's always been the question. We want to catch snow, and so in these conversations like that, we're not completely eliminating residue. We are taking the parts that the biology can break down, and we've talked about upshift, we've talked about ether and enzyme technology. We can't put it on the bucket, right? But that is what we're talking about, is the biology breaking down residue and giving us usable nutrient. And that's, there's two large impacts. You have to plant beans. Man, it's nice and have to run through that corn. No-till situations, getting rid of some of that for, nutrient use efficiency, but still having something to maintain the soil. So it definitely works both ways. That is why it's such an easy product to talk about.
Yeah.
Do we have any other questions on Excavator? So Tuesday came out, and 4 rows down there that has the brand new Revline hopper throttle soybean was the greenest, best looking in the plot. We did not know that. We didn't. I didn't have the plot map. I didn't know any of that. I showed up because I can help pound posts. So we've used Revline hopper throttle here, corn and soybeans. You know, the soybean product last year, it's actually, so this is last year's iteration. Again, I've been a salesman most of my life, so I did my best to not cherry pick. I dug a bunch of plants this morning. I was sweating like crazy. So we have untreated, Lewis, if you could grab that one. So this is about the best darn untreated I could find. So this is no treatment. It actually comes out of those 4 rows there. It does not have any biological assistance, is what I would say. We don't have Excavator, anything like that. And it actually has a pretty decent, you know, build up on top. It wasn't snapped, but it didn't root very well. Part of that obviously is the season and stress early. And then, so this here is your last season's Revline hopper throttle soybean. So that product, right, was your, you know, 5 ounces of Terrasim. You had your proprietary triple stack Brady rhizobia and your manganese iron and 80-20 talc. So a great root. I'll be honest with you, I probably could have had a heavier guy helping me dig that soil because these are big roots. So we did snap off some, but you can quite visually see the addition of, you know, so that base product is still in there, but what we've added is zinc. So as we go down the line, there won't be a test, but so we have azospirillum, we have bacilli, we have trichoderma, and I should almost pass this around. The nodules go out all the way to the end of these fine root hairs. And so why that's important and why that's impactful for yield, filling grain late season, is we've had a couple times the question, well, if I'm doing rhizobia and I have all these other nitrogen fixing bacteria, is that going to make my rhizobia lazy? Am I going to lose nodulation? And the answer, thankfully, is no. Every root, you know, we saw them over at Biology is Fertility. You know, so we do have bigger, stronger roots. We have fantastic nodulation, and those fine root hairs are the reason why those plants are a little bit taller, a little bit greener, is because we started in an extreme, well, for Wisconsin, extreme drought, and it was able to uptake more nutrient, more water. Have we used, just kind of show of hands here, have we used this year's, which is last season's, soybean product? Okay, so we all had problems with the bucket. A couple of my guys broke the bucket unintentionally. So that rhizobia, and this is actually John's story, so I don't want to get too much into it, but it is a proprietary blend. It is different and special. John, you want to talk about how you know it's different?
Sure. Yeah. So we have our own seed treater. We inoculate our beans through the seed treater, and then obviously we've got the inoculant and the hopper throttle. And we had good nodulation. We were always happy with it. Thought it was great until we used hopper throttle. And when you've got a V1 bean plant and you've got nodules on it, it's pretty dang impressive.
Yeah. It just, you know, it's a consistent theme. You know, bigger, stronger roots faster. So we'll talk about enzymes and the technologies there, but if we can build that powerhouse early, we can build better soybeans, better yielding soybeans, better standing soybeans, and more capable of filling those pods and not aborting them as the season goes along.
In the drive, you know, the whole long season drive of nodulation is really quite impressive with it. That's something I've noticed. I've got soybeans that if I dug up today, you wouldn't see the stem through the nodules. It's really impressive.
Do we have IDC concerns in this group? Anybody? No? Okay. Well, that would have been a fantastic thing to talk about. So what's really interesting is we're actually able to limit IDC to some extent, just, you know, through one mode of action is just having more roots, right? If you can touch more soil, it's just like water, it's just like nutrient. The more area you touch, the more you can take in, even if it's at the same rate. What's also very interesting is a lot of folks, you know, South Dakota, we'll just use them for example. If you don't have IDC, most folks don't test for iron deficiency in their soybeans, because if you don't have it, you don't know you need it. So what's very interesting about the Meristem product is that it actually increases uptake of iron in our soybeans. So it's maybe one of my asks is next year, if you do not use a product, or if you have side-by-sides, even if you do not have IDC, go out, do some tissue samples. Not only are you going to have more zinc, because we have zinc in the bucket, but you're going to have more iron from the fact that the Meristem can solubilize iron in a way that is not usually available to your plants. Do we have any questions?
I've got one for the crowd, actually.
Oh,
Has
good.
anybody noticed that uses the hopper throttle? Has anybody noticed a heavier test weight from your beans?
Not yet.
What are your beans weighing? 57, 56 pounds, 55?
Less than 60 by a long shot.
Yeah, so the government says 60, but what if I told you if you had the right mix, you can see 60, 61 pound beans?
That would be a first.
Yeah, well, that was a first for me last year, so pretty impressive. But I do attribute a fair amount of that to the hopper throttle, as well as carrying through with other products, just to keep that plant growing. But if you can grow 60 pound beans, it's really something. Not very many people have probably ever done that.
Really adds up.
Oh, absolutely. Well, it's, if you go from 55 to 60 pounds, look at the percentage. It's massive. There's no better way to get yield than put 5 pounds on your beans.
And we'll actually, what we have found today is John is a wealth of knowledge. So if we don't have any questions passed on the Revline hopper throttle soybean, we will actually move to a little bit of positioning and in-crop products. But do we have any questions before we do that?
Some people complain about the dust, and I saw the video, showed them the video where they did it, put it in a bucket, and they planted 20% back in the lab and realized there was 9 times as much in the seed that really needed. They planted 50% of that in that box. There was still more than enough than 80%.
Yep.
So my biggest complaint people had was, man, I feel like I'm the way I'm buttoned in. So I got a lot of guys that just took the mini box, dumped it in the mini box, and they put 6 or 7 of them on their truck, and
Yep.
it just mixed in better. They just opened up the lid, dumped it in the top of their mini box before they put them on their seed tender, and they like that better than putting in their injection system on their deal.
Yes.
They feel like, that was an issue. Guys complaining that was
So
a little bit, the dust, but we feel like that eliminated a lot of that.
yeah, what I think and what I stand pretty firmly by is if you allow, the American producer to find solutions, they're always better than what I'm going to find. So yes, we had a producer. He called it digging a badger hole in his corn. So he'd dig a hole in the middle, put it in there so it'd feed through. And he thought that was better than, doing it the other way. But I think, on instances like that, it's you just do what's best for your situation, and not getting covered by talc graphite isn't bad either. So
I'll comment a little bit on that. If you're a guy that has your beans treated and then you go plant them 2-3 days later, that's actually the best time to put that on. Run a talc conductor through the seed treater. You're gonna have great coverage. It's gonna stick that bean because they're still a little moist, and it'll dry up. You won't have any plantable issues. It's really the best way to do it. But we have a talc conductor because it takes 2 to 3 weeks to plant beans, and you don't want to open that box and let it sit that long. So the talc conductor, we haven't seen any better or poorer spots in the fields due to mixing issues. But if you can put it through a seed treater, that's pretty awesome results.
And that is a good point. And the new buckets will have the ability to close and seal again. But once we shake this up, once you get that into solution, the numbers are way better than I think most people assume. But we want you to have that on the seed in a week.
Yeah.
So, if you can run that through the treater, at the end of the situation, that really alleviates a lot of issues. But it's definitely a case-by-case basis on what works the best on your farm, your operation.
Absolutely.
Let's move along here a little bit. Oh, sorry, Lewis. So we've had the opportunity to we've talked about foundation, we've talked about, so we've covered a very short portion of this map here, and we should have upshift and ether on there. So we've talked about the enzymes, and we understand their value to giving us available phosphate, available micronutrients, kick-starting soil microbial life. So once we've built this foundation and we've had the opportunity to get started right, there's just a whole flow, and Mitch spoke about it this morning, which was good. Is 25% of the yield is determined in season. So per se, if you want 114 bushel soybeans, you're not done after you've built the foundation. If you want to build, big healthy roots fast, you've already done that, you're working on it. But the rest of the season is where we really enhance yield, where we enhance plant nutrient availability. So Lewis, would you like to talk a little bit about this first pass in here and what you've seen with your producers?
So I'm a cheap guy. I like ROI. Our business is built on ROI, and this Stimulate product is something that's always impressed me.
Here, Lewis, let's do this real quick. Sure. Sorry about that.
Sorry. Like David said, we've built the foundation, with the hopper throttle, and we've got a nice root system, and then we've got an opportunity when we come back with that herbicide pass to maybe stimulate that again. Does anybody have complaints about yellow beans when they get to V1, V2, or is that just myself? Do you guys struggle with that once they get up and going, turn yellow, kind of sit there? Nope. Just what's that? They did this year. So the fastest way to turn those around, in my opinion, and what I've seen, is by having that Stimulate product in the tank. And most of our growers, we're telling them, have that in with your herbicide pass. So that product is going to help stimulate root growth additionally. So there's a component in there that's going to tell it to continue to put roots on and grow faster. And then we are also going to stimulate that plant to put on more branches, more opportunities for flowering sites, more opportunities for pods. The third thing I like about it is it seems like the product or the beans can grow through the herbicide that we're putting down quicker at that point. So we're loading up a lot of these herbicide passes with Enlist, Extend, Roundup. We've got some Group 15s in there, and sometimes we're really setting those beans back, right? It seems like when we put this Stimulate product in the tank, we can grow through that stress faster and get those beans recovered and going. So I really like that product at the herbicide timing. I think it does all those things well and just continues on that foundation we built. John's got some things to add about what else to have in the tank there.
It's important to keep that plant growing, and the Stimulate does a good job with that. The biggest way to increase yield is to put more nodes on your plant, and sometimes that results in having extremely tall soybeans, and then you got to hold on to all your flowers, right? So the Stimulate does a good job of that. But to really utilize the Stimulate, you got to have a micronutrient package with it. You've got to feed it. That plant's going to surge really hard, and it can't, in my opinion, take everything out of the soil it needs during that time period. So we like to run NKB with it. It really couples together nice, and it makes a good program.
And I think, earlier we were having this conversation, and I've used a pretty fair bit. Again, I've been an agronomist for a decade, and I've used PGRs from multiple companies, and sometimes we had amazing results, sometimes we had middling results, and it seemed like an issue sometimes with ROI, whether it was doing us any favors. And when John was talking earlier, he said every time you do a PGR, you need to have some kind of nutrition in there to feed that plant. And I was standing back and I went, man alive, that makes a lot of sense. Because your producers, it doesn't matter if you're in South Dakota, Indiana, Ohio, every field's different, the nutritional value is different. So we've talked about building these big, healthy, strong plants. We have these big root systems. We come out, we shoot it with the PGR that's going to stimulate even more root growth, more plant matter. If we don't feed it, if we don't help it eat a little bit, then sometimes we might not be doing as much good as we want. Even though we are building bigger roots still, we're still helping branch, but the way to impact yield is to keep feeding, keep doing those little things that'll add up through multiple passes.
Absolutely. Yep. And timing and method of application, we'll touch on that right now. It's more important than probably anything you'll do in season. If you don't apply it right, you're wasting your money. If you're applying at the wrong time, you're wasting your money. So when I talk about method of application, I'm going to talk about droplet size, which is your coverage. It's extremely important, and temperature. If you're 80 degrees, you're fine. If you're 85 degrees, I'd probably shut it down. You don't want to spray all afternoon. You're wasting your time. Now, droplet size, you can run 10 gallon if you got a really fine nozzle, but more gallons is better, and the best time to spray is when you got a really good heavy dew in the morning. That fine droplet's going to hit that drop of dew on that leaf, and your coverage is going to expand exponentially, and that's just the best time you're going to get a result.
But if you're putting it with your herbicide pass,
right? Well, you really shouldn't be.
Which one are you out there for? The herbicide or the?
Well, you're both, right? I mean, if your weeds are shut down, you're not doing much good spraying them either. Oh, they're going to die, but where I'm come from, I've got water hemp that you can't kill with a 4X rate. And if it's 90 degrees outside, you just leave that sprayer parked.
I'm confused.
So, John, we touched on, early season, but something that, South Dakota boy, when he heard about how often you're making passes, and we're talking about 114 bushel soybeans, and even if we're talking less, you've hit on a point that we've really hammered on, is the health, keeping the pods full, because you can't do it if you're not doing what you're doing, basically. Right. Do you want to talk about that? Once we get past this early season pass, the stimulate pass, when we start getting into the reproductive stages, we change what we do, what we recommend. Do you want to talk about that, how you guys operated on your? Yeah,
I'll touch on it a little bit. So every year you've got plant stress. I don't care if it's the best year you've ever farmed, that plant has stress, and you got to get rid of it. So the stimulate's a good way. You get ethylene buildup if you got moisture stress, heat stress, drought stress. You just got to get rid of that ethylene. But you can do that through fertilizer applications. You get the right balance of fertilizer. It triggers natural growth hormones in the plant. But to supplement it, if you've got, again, stressed plants, throw some stimulate on it and you'll snap that plant right out of it a lot of times.
So then as you go into reproductive stages, you change your nutrient though, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Correct. Yep.
Okay.
Yep, I get what you're getting at. So we really like the NKB through the later reproductive stages, just to help drive that grain fill. You can only pull so much through the roots, but you get it on the plant, it's an instant shot. Then the NKB-S next year is going to be a great addition. Sulfur is so hard to get enough of, and we're running 40, 50 pounds an acre of elemental sulfur, and it's not enough. So the sulfur in the foliars is a really nice benefit.
And what, Lewis touches on this about concentrations and different PGRs, and a lot of folks, the issue is that we don't always know exactly what the PGRs are meant to do. We'll use Revline late season. What we're trying to do is maintain fruit. It doesn't matter if it's wheat, it doesn't matter if it's corn, milo, sunflowers, as we go down the list. We need to maintain the fruit as long as possible during stress, and it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter the stress. So we talked about stimulate and how it builds, more roots. It gives us a couple more branches. It just keeps adding and adding and adding. Well, once we've hit reproductive stages, once we've hit fruiting, grain fill, we don't want more limbs. We don't want more roots. We want to fill. So in a situation like that, we don't change the NKB. We don't change that. But all we do is we want the plant growth regulators to be doing what we want them to do, is helping fill, whatever crop that you have out there.
Right. And we talk about using stimulate to hold on to flowers, right? Yep. But it's equally as important to hold on to the pod in the plant, or the bean in the pod, as it is to hold on to the flower. Because once you achieve that next level of, say you increase your pods by 25 per plant, now you got to focus on holding that bean in the pod, and it's a whole nother issue. But again, it's just through stress mitigation, and a lot of these products will do that for you.
So we've had the opportunity to talk for a while. Fantastic. Yes.
What was the bean variety that made 114.
They were an NK, gosh, I'm trying to remember exactly now. I believe they were a 3.0. We had some beans in a test plot last year. We had 9 different numbers. Again, a small plot, but saw numbers as high as 143. So we know we've got more potential, and those were some extra added passes, some different things that we hadn't done before.
Spacing and population.
So we're 30-inch spacing. We've done, all last year we split every field with 2 different planters, same hybrid in both planters, 15 and 30-inch, and it depended on the hybrid. So we kicked the 15-inch planter to the curb and run 30-inch only. And we like to have a stand count of 110,000. Final stand, 110 final stand.
Insecticides and fungicides.
We don't really run any insecticide on the beans other than obviously liquid over the top. You don't want a bean plant chewed on. That's how they're making their seed. You know, it's a little different in corn. They don't chew on corn leaves the same way. So every pass we're out there, we're running some kind of cheap insecticide. Fungicide, we'll do several passes of fungicide a year.
What was your last pass? What stage?
We'll go as late as R5 if needed.
Well, fantastic. Thank you guys for your time today. And we blitzed through a lot of stuff really fast. So if you catch one of us later, you can always ask questions.